السلام عليكم، يعطيكم العافية. أنا الدكتور محمود حماد. اليوم نحكي عن أول محاضرة في Visual Programming using C Sharp. Okay. So this course actually is not a C Sharp course. It's actually a visual programming course using C Sharp programming language, and there's a big difference between those two. So C Sharp is object-oriented programming language. You can design, develop various applications. Okay. And visual programming, we mean by it is to build a software system that has a visual components. Okay. To build a visual software system that has various graphical user interface controls and widgets. For example, menu, buttons, window. So those are the various visual programming or graphical user interface widgets. Okay. So in this course, we will use a C# as a programming language to build our visual programming software system. All right. So let's give just an introduction about this course, and the objectives out of this lecture is to be able to differentiate between various types of programming languages, understand visual programming, what do we mean by it, and understanding the .NET technology, and understanding the Visual Studio IDE or integrated development environment. So there are the different programming languages. There are different types of programming languages. Most people they divide them to high-level programming languages and low-level programming languages. So when we say high-level programming languages, we mean that the programming languages that they are written in they are written in a language that is close to human languages. So you read them, they look like for English language, but they are not actually English language. They are like close to human readable languages. Okay. Examples of these high-level programming languages are Java, C#, Python, PHP, etc. Whereas the second type of programming languages is the low-level programming languages. Those are low-level programming languages are close to machine code, close to binary code, which means they run faster, they run close to the architecture, and they are the low-level programming languages are designed for wide spectrum. They are actually designed for wide range of applications, whereas high-level programming languages most of the time they are designed for a specific domain, for a specific purpose, and that's why we see there are a lot of high-level programming languages, but at the end when you compile them they go down to few binary languages. All right. Regarding so examples of that is like assembly languages. There are different types of assembly languages: IBM, PDB, Intel, x86, x88, and etc. So now this is in terms of types of programming languages. We also can distinguish between programming languages as the style of programming language. So there are different styles, or we call it programming paradigms. So there are different styles of programming languages. So there is like a functional programming, procedurally programming. Let's list them and then go back to them one after another. And there's like object-oriented programming paradigm. There's logical programming, and there's database programming. So let's go back to the functional programming. In the functional programming, we mean that you develop a function that actually takes an input and then produces an output. It does not care about the state of the data, so it does not maintain a state of the data. So that's why they call it immutable, or there is no state. Okay. So just to say, a simplified function that takes an input, processes it, produces an output. It does not maintain any state of the data. So we can use a Java, Python, Lisp to create this functional programming. Procedural programming is a little bit more advanced than functional programming. In the procedural programming, you have like a problem, and then you decompose this problem to small pieces. You say to sub problems, and then you implement each sub problem using a procedure. and then those procedures, they invoke one another, they communicate with one another. Okay, you can use languages such as Java, C, C++, C Sharp, whatever you want. Okay, but here the focus in solving the problem instead of having various objects, and it's not okay. So which means that you can use object-oriented programming language such as Java for procedural programming. Okay, I think most of us, when we started writing Java programming program or C Sharp program, our first program, it was like just one class that has a lot of static methods, and in the main you invoke these various methods in order to solve a problem. In this case, actually, as we all know, when you have a static method, you don't actually need to create a kind of object. You just like invoke this method directly for using the name of its class. So in this case, actually, you don't create objects and invoke the methods. You actually just invoke the methods to do something, I think, to solve a big problem. Whereas in the object-oriented programming, the focus actually on the objects. Okay, we will use objects, though, and the objects can contain both data and code. So the data represents the state of the object, and the code, the behavior of the code represents the behavior of the object. So each object has a behavior and it has a state. Okay, so object-oriented programming languages are there since 80s. So it has been there for a long time, and that actually shows the well design of the object-oriented programming. So all object-oriented programming languages such as Java, Python, C++, C Sharp, Objective-C, PHP, etc. All of these programming languages, they rely on well-known principles such as encapsulation, abstraction, inheritance, polymorphism, and those. So those are the main important principles for any object-oriented programming language. Logical programming, those are based on formal logic. In the formal logic, we have predicates, not predictions. We have predicates and we have clauses. For example, A and B, or C then D. So this is a predicate that consists of various clauses. A is a clause, B is a clause, D is a clause. Okay, so sometimes we really need to think in this logical programming to produce our program. Languages such as Prolog and Datalog are examples of logical programming languages. Database programming, those are programming languages. They focus on building database schemas and managing them. So for example, Oracle SQL or SQL++, MS SQL. Those are the databases, and they have their own programming languages, SQL+, in order to build the database and to manage it. These programming languages, they have instructions for DDL commands, data definition languages, which are the language to create and delete the various objects in the database, such as indexes, such as indices such as index, or indices such as tables, views, synonyms, etc. The DML languages, which are the data manipulation languages, and those are the commands you use to insert, update, delete the data into tables. Alright, so the focus in this visual programming using C# course on the object-oriented programming language. Yeah. So we use C# since it's one of the most popular programming languages needed to be learned in 2020 and even before. So if you just search for the 9 best programming languages to learn in 2020, or the most important programming languages for junior developers, you would see C# as one of them. The good thing about C#, using C#, you can develop various types of applications. You can develop desktop applications, you can develop mobile applications, Android applications, or iOS applications, or Windows applications. You can develop web applications. You can develop even 2D or 3D games applications in Unity using C# code. Also, you can develop virtual reality and augmented reality applications using, for example, platforms such as Unity, where you write a C# code. All right. So now what do we mean by .NET framework? So we hear the word .NET framework a lot. So when we say the word framework, it means that there are many classes and libraries to do certain things. Which means that instead of building instead of rebuilding components that everyone wants to use them, the programming language provider, they create this framework, and then users they reuse these class libraries or the classes inside that framework. So for example, let's assume that we are all working in a company, and we are given a task, for example, to download tweets from the Twitter social media and analyze these tweets. So a better way to do it, instead of each one of us would authenticate to the Twitter, download some tweets, do something about them, we can create a framework that would you can give, for example, this framework secret key or username password for Twitter account, and it goes to that account, downloads some tweets, and then process these tweets. So we can create a framework that does that, and then the various developers would use that framework. So same thing here in C#. Microsoft created this framework, .NET framework, that contains classes and class libraries needed for any C# developer to develop their application, so they can focus in the business layer on the business needs more than focus on the low level details. Alright. So the .NET framework provides interoperability across other programming languages via the CLR. So CLR is the Common Language Runtime, and this is a very important component. It's the virtual machine component of the .NET framework. So we all know that Java code runs on a Java virtual machine. Okay, so this JVM allows the Java to be a language to be a platform independent, because you are actually running the Java code on the Java virtual machine, the JVM, instead of running the Java code directly on the system or the architecture. So this CLR is a virtual machine component of the .NET framework. CLR converts the code, the C# code that you write, or the .NET code you write, into a common machine instructions which are executed on the CPU or the processor. The CLR provides also other functionalities, including garbage collection, memory management, type safe, exception handling, etc. So this diagram shows that you write the code in various programming languages, C#, .NET, in the .NET languages, and then the code will be compiled to common intermediate language, or CIL, using them, and it will run on the virtual machine in the common language runtime. Okay, so now after the success of the .NET framework, Microsoft created .NET Core. So the .NET Core is a free and open source cross-platform .NET framework. Okay, so the .NET framework is actually a commercial product. It's not free, so you can see the source code of the .NET framework, and also it's not an open source, so you can so you have to have a license, or you have to pay for that since it's not free. And also you can see the source code of the .NET framework, since it's not open source. And .NET Core, it's a cross-platform, and that's amazing, which means that .NET Core runs on various platforms, where Windows, Linux, Unix, Mac OS, etc. Right? So now to develop a C# application, or develop an application using C# programming language, usually we use an IDE. IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment, which is actually the software system that you use to build, which is actually the tool that you use to build a software system. So here we will use Visual Studio. It does not matter if you have Visual Studio 2015, 17, 19. The more up to the more recent Visual Studio, the better. Alright, so during this semester we will use the Visual Studio IDE. here's my Visual Studio, and as you can see, using the Visual Studio you can develop a wide range of applications, such as web and console applications, multi-platform. You can develop mobile applications, iOS or Android. You can develop applications for the cloud, Mac, tvOS. So you can develop a wide range of applications using the Visual Studio. Okay, thank you so much for listening, and we'll continue in the next lecture. Thank you.